I want to start this off by saying two things. One, I'm not a great writer and have a hazy memory of all that happened. I was actually asleep when this occurred, but I wasn't at the same time. And two, this account is completely true, but you can believe what you want. I wouldn't believe it had it not happened to me. I was 8 years old at the time, and I had very vivid dreams and nightmares. I later found out that the dreams and nightmares I had weren't just dreams. To this day, I still don't understand why this happened or how. I've heard it called a few different names: astral projection, out-of-body experience, etc. The night in question led me to realize what had been happening years down the road. Keep in mind, this happened 5 years before Insidious came out, and I kind of repressed it up until seeing that movie. It wasn't the same as my encounter, but it was equally terrifying. We were a poor family, just my mother and her 3 children in a 1-bedroom apartment. Her boyfriend was there occasionally too, and I'm really glad he was there that night. My brother, who was 2 to 2.5 at the time, and I shared a bed that was in our dining room. My mom had her bed in her room, and my baby sister had a crib and a walk-in closet. She would have been about 6 months old at this point. There was this stain on the wall that was reminiscent of those paintings that follow your movement with their creepy eyes. I stared at this thing on multiple occasions, wondering what in the heck could have created such a weird stain. I had this creepy feeling when I looked at it. It seemed so familiar to me. I can only describe its appearance as some sort of demonic dragon-man hybrid. The creepy red guy in Insidious had nothing on this thing, except they shared a similarity. They both had those creepy yellow eyes. The stain had been there a few months, and I woke up sweating and crying more and more. The night everything happened, however, I was stuck in the corner of my bedroom, very near to my ceiling. I remember looking down at my body beside my screaming brother, who was pointing to the other side of the room. The stain was on the exact other side of the wall from where this thing was. I could see my brother screaming at it and trying to wake me up, and every fiber of my being was trying to wake up, but some force was holding me back. I had this goosebump sensation run up my spine, and I looked over to the other side of the room as my mom and her boyfriend half ran into the room to see what was wrong. My mom's boyfriend was a big dude, and he was prepared to whoop ass if it was an intruder. I saw the creature right as they entered. To this day, I believe it's a demon, and I don't believe it's gone for good. My brother was screaming, "There's a man! He's a snake! He's here to take me and Johnny!" Not my real name, but I prefer not to disclose that. My mom's boyfriend, we'll call him Jack, was a pretty ballsy dude and often bragged about the time that he came back to life after 30-some minutes when his truck was hit by a semi. Him being on the other side for those 30 minutes did something to him, though. Behind that tough guy shell, he was actually more afraid of what was out there in the world than he could even imagine. Jack saw the whatever the heck you can call it in the corner after hearing my brother screaming, and I mean, he actually saw it. And what's more, he turned his head my way, and then he saw me. Not the body in the bed snoring as all hell is going on the same room. The me in the corner opposite the monster. He hesitated for a minute and then left to the other room. He came back with what appeared to be a really old book. It wasn't an old Bible, though. It was something different. He started reading words from it aloud and inching towards the demon. The demon seemed to be annoyed by this. At this point, I felt like my life force was somehow being drained, and felt even more restricted by whatever force was holding me in place. Jack turned towards my general direction, almost seeming to look right through me at this point, like he couldn't see me anymore, and then he said in a reassuring tone, "God is sending us an extra pair of wings." He then slammed the book closed, and from it emanated this bright light, and engulfed the whole room, and I felt like the chains were being ripped away from my astral body. I could see the bright light pushing the monster into the wall, and just like that, it was out of the room. The light continued to grow, and I felt like I was being forced back into my body. And hours later, I woke up. I thought I just had the craziest dream ever, but upon waking up, I saw my mom pacing in the living room, and Jack was cleaning away the stain on the wall. At that point, I felt the presence leave, and didn't have another dream for the next 6 or so years, not even the regular ones. But that was completely fine by me. I verified this story with both my mom and her boyfriend a couple years later, and my mom freaked out that I knew as much as I did. After all, she saw me sitting there sleeping the whole time. She didn't see what was in that other plane with me, but she knew it was there nonetheless. I still have questions, and over the years I have gotten some answers. I did learn the demon's name later on from my little brother. I'm not gonna share that, as it's unwise to share demon names. and I haven't been able to dig up any information on the name that I did get from my brother. But I do feel fear every time I think or say that word, so I know somehow my little brother was right. If you have any information that could help me solve this and get some closure, don't hesitate to comment. And if you ever have a run-in with a demon similar to the demon I ran into, call a priest. Back in the day, a flagman on the railroad would use a lantern with a red bandana wrapped around it to signal danger at night. One night, I was running a coal train to a plant in Louisiana when I noticed a dull red light hovering above the tracks about 1.5 miles ahead of me. Knowing all the railroad history and knowing red means danger, I begin slowing the train so I can stop to see what is wrong. As I get closer, I can begin to make out a pale white man in a dirty sweat-stained shirt with oily overalls on. He's wearing a cap that looks like it dates back to the late 1800s to the early 1900s. As the train slows down, he lifts his lantern, waves his arm free in a slow motion back and forth as signaling me to stop. I keep visual of this man to the point I'm within 100 yards of him, but I'm still moving slightly too fast to stop where he's at, and I know I'll pass him by a few hundred feet. At 50 yards, the man steps to the center of the track and stands there staring at me. I'm now doing all I can, trying to get the train to stop immediately, but it's not a Honda Civic, and it's acting as such. The train moves closer and closer. 40 yards, 30 yards, 20 yards, 10, 5. The man disappears over the nose of the train. My conductor and I are now panicking, thinking we've hit the man. When the train finally stops, the conductor rushes to find the man under the train. What felt like eternity. I'm phoning dispatch, but when my conductor radios, "Jack, there isn't anyone under the train. There isn't even a sign anyone was here." I ask dispatch if the track is out ahead. He tells me he's checking on that to hold tight. A moment later, and he says, "Yes, and Tim Wheeler's hung up on the track. Did you not see a red light at the signal?" I reply, "No, the light must be out." I radioed my conductor, asking him to look for a signal. He radios me immediately. "Lights out." I relay the message to dispatch, and he says he will send someone to fix it immediately. In the meantime, just hold tight and he will call when it's clear a run. I tell my conductor what dispatch says. We both sit in confusion as to what just happened. This man just stopped us from hitting a vehicle, yet he wasn't really there. It was the freakiest thing I'd ever experienced. In 1992, I rented a house in Fredericksburg, Virginia, following several years of living abroad. It was a rather pleasant house, a ranch design, and an older neighborhood. There were many large trees that gave shade in the summer, and a wooded area behind the house, along with friendly neighbors and a genuinely placid calm overall. It was a nice place to live. There was not a hint that this house was haunted by an active, though unhappy ghost. As ghost implies, a frightening specter in my mind. I think I preferred the term spirit. The house haunting was confirmed to be human. The haunted did not begin immediately. Months passed, perhaps a year. It began unannounced. There was no warning of any kind, nor even a hint of warning from the landlord. What I recall is a very lovely late summer day. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, our front entry door opened with a bang, and the loud chatter of swinging Venetian blinds. My wife and son were with me in our family room watching television. My daughter was serving in the military and was far off and unexpected. Our heads snapped sharply as we quickly looked at each other's faces, looking for a hint of understanding regarding of what was happening. There was none. Two probabilities came to mind. The first being my daughter home on unexpected leave with the intent of surprising us. The second was criminal home invasion. After a moment spent gathering my wits, I moved from the family room to the living room. I found our entry door wide open, the blinds which covered its window still swaying side to side. The door, for those prone to detail, opened inward. There was no apparent explanation for what had happened. That door was little used by our family and was kept locked. The door was rather difficult to open, as the door itself was simply stuck in the frame. It took a lot of effort to open, and when the door finally did, it popped free rather heavily as a result of being stuck or jammed, and the force it took to open it, the metal Venetian blinds would swing and sway and clatter. In all, annoying enough that our front door was almost never used. After that first experience, things changed. The front door continued to open, although not frequently. The back door would also be found open from time to time. Bedroom doors opened much more frequently though, and one bedroom in particular. As we were never in fear, and there was no show of hostility, we accepted our new reality. There may also have been an occasional noise during the night, but nothing of real note. We simply adopted whoever this was and often spoke to them. We have simple greetings or conversation. This came to an end for us in 1998, when it was time to return to my work abroad. Movers came to take away our belongings. While this went on, the lady living next door spoke to me over the fence and asked if anything unusual happened during our stay. I affirmed that it had. Then she told me the following. A woman and her daughter lives in that house that in the years past. The girl, a high school student, was 16 or 17 years of age. On New Year's Eve, the girl wanted to attend a party. The mother declined because of severe ice storms. The girl went anyway. The mother waited up to early hours for her daughter to return before crying herself to sleep. The mother was awakened by crying and discovered her daughter sitting in the chair next to her bed. The girl sobbed, "Oh mother, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." The girl repeated her statement and then vanished. After 3 days of searching, the girl's car was located upside down in a canal used by a local power company to produce electricity. The girl's body was in the car, which had slid off the icy road into the frozen canal. The woman who told me this was the sister of the girl's mother, making her the aunt of the girl. They have lived side by side as neighbors as well as relatives. I recall all of this with great clarity. This is a true and accurate presentation of what I had experienced. After I moved to North Bay, Ontario, I noticed right away that there was something evil in that house. It started off simple enough with shuffling at night, which at first I thought it was one of our cats, so I didn't really think much of it. It eventually got to the point where we would start hearing our names called out of nowhere, being somewhat used to this from my previous house in Manitoba. Unfortunately, things only escalated from there. It affected me and my dad. We were mostly the ones that were there. We had this cold room in the back of the house that had a walkout into the backyard. No one in the family felt comfortable in that room. My dad was starting to get supper ready one evening, and as he was looking through the freezer, he heard a male voice say, "Ken," from right around the corner in the laundry room. Thinking nothing of it, he said, "What is it, Cam?" In no answer. He came out into the living room, which was downstairs as well. He asked me if I was calling him for something, and I responded no. Side note, I usually call my dad old man or dad. I never use his first name. Later that month, my dad and I were watching a ghost show on YouTube. The host asked, "If there are any demons here, make your presence known." Immediately, after the host said that, a bird flew into the glass on the window directly behind us. If that was either something paranormal or maybe just sheer luck. Towards the end of our first year in North Bay, my sister has seen a shadow person peeking out around the corner in the cold room, and it freaked her out. She had the feeling as something was in that house, and it was bad. After New Year's, I was playing on my brand new Xbox 360 in the basement. And directly to my left, my dad's recliner, a deep, guttural growl that lasted for a good 5 seconds emanated from it. Now, this is going to sound like BS, because most people would say fuck it and take off. But I paused my game, looked over directly at the noise and told it, "Is that all you fucking got?" It reached a point where the paranormal activity had reached a daily occurrence. One evening, I was getting ready to go to bed and talking to my brother. I had finished chatting with my brother and was about to head upstairs to bed. As I'm turning the corner, my brother's cat ran out of my cousin's room. He turned and hissed into the dark room. She immediately ran up to me and started climbing my leg. So I bent down to pick her up, and I was moving up. I saw a large, black mass rush past me and go up the stairs. So I immediately talked to my brother about it, when my brother and I both saw an orb, with the lights on, mind you. It shot from the roof and into the floor. It was at this point that I was fed up with the bad vibes getting worse and worse, and performed a cleansing in that house. After that, I never saw anything again, but I'm not sure if it worked for the people who moved in after us. Apparently after 2 years, my parents told me that they sold that house. It was up for sale for a long time, and that's about how long it took for everything to reach the point where I performed the cleansing. I've had my experiences off and on over the years, but it would be a very, very long story. I will share some of my most recent experiences. When I was looking for houses earlier this year, the first I had to look at was an original church from my town in southern Manitoba. I went inside and didn't feel much on the first floor until I went upstairs and felt a very sad presence in the hall of the upstairs. I left not being able to do much with the spirit as I was only there for a short while. But as I was leaving, I looked up to the second-story window and saw a woman looking down at me from the window. This other house was way worse though. The moment we pulled up onto the property, I just felt weird. While my realtor was opening the shop, I was drawn to the second floor window and I saw a younger woman looking at me, just like the other house. We went inside the house and was immediately drawn to the basement, a creepy cellar of all places that was low and had terrible lighting. I'm standing down there feeling more and more sick, and I tell my sister that there's something bad in this house. As I made my way through the house, I felt more sick and dizzy, and I was way worse on the second floor. I had to hold him to the wall in order to keep myself from falling over. I eventually had enough, had to walk out of the house and let my sister and the realtor look for the last few things. I felt better after getting out of the house, and when we went to leave to go get some supper, as we were leaving, I looked at the house and I see a complete black hooded figure standing in the window staring at me. I couldn't see anything but the shape of the hood and jet black, but I could feel it staring at me. I told it that it can't follow me or anyone I was in the car with. I haven't sensed it since, and that was almost 3 months ago now. But I hope I don't come into contact with that energy again. First of all, I would like to apologize for any grammar mistakes. I am from Eastern Europe, so English is not my first language. I've been following your channel for some time now, and I would like to share a story. It's not my personal story. This thing happened to a friend of mine. She and her husband were staying overnight at her parents' house. In the countryside, it's a small village, pretty compact, as the houses are close to each other. It's not at all secluded, but still pretty rural. They were staying in some kind of guest bedroom. The windows are facing down the street, so from this room, you can hear everything very well. If, for example, someone would be walking down the road. It was late at night, past midnight, and they were awoken by a terrible noise outside. Their dog woke up too, but he was too scared to come out from under the bed. He was just hiding there, growling from time to time. They say that they heard many horses running down the street. The commotion was terrible and it went on for a while. They also heard change as if the horses were dragging them. They were too frightened to get out of bed and look out the window to see what was happening. They felt like they shouldn't see. I know that explanations can be found, but as they described it, something was really wrong with the incident. Nobody there owned any horses. There were no wild horses around, and the creepiest part, no one else heard them, which was pretty impossible since they were extremely loud. They asked the parents the next day and the neighbors, but nobody besides them heard anything. They are religious people, and they were not drinking or consuming anything that could affect their lucidity. I honestly don't think that they would lie about it, or that they would deny any logical explanation for just the sake of being interested or something like that. They were really frightened about that night, and they are not sure what was going on, but they are sure something was wrong. All the loud commotion, the noises the horses were making while running, the change, they described it all as coming straight from hell. Also, there are legends in the folklore saying that the devil travels around the world with his horses, and sometimes in remote cursed places you can meet him. Who knows? Maybe it was him passing by. Back in 2010, me and my friend went outside in his backyard forest, which is a couple acres at most, probably close to 1 a.m., to go explore. There's a steep cliff when you first walk in. When we were standing at the cliff before the path, it goes down leading to the rest of the forest. I could see a tall, white, illuminated figure, and it was in between two trees, kind of moving around between them. I asked my friend if he saw it. He said yes, he could as well. And then we stood silent in fear, and I could feel impending doom. The best way I can describe it is that feeling you get when someone dies or you are about to die. That feeling of dread inside your chest, like you are helpless. We left very quick because we had no clue what it was, and then scared both of us. I remember my friend yelling something at it, and it was just silently, still, slightly moving between the trees like a slight hover. The figure was pure white and solid, and seemed to be at least 6 to 7 feet tall from where we were standing, which was about 30 to 40 feet away. I am positive it was not a living creature or a human being, and it was not a trick of the mind or light. There was no light nor moon shining in the forest because it was pitch black and filled with pine trees. It had no physical features at all, except for very long arms. It kind of looked like how an ape would have its arms, but they were very long. It was pitch black in the forest, but the whole figure was sort of blurry, giving off a life, like you would look at something out of focus. It wasn't illuminated to the point to where it was getting off light. It was more, whatever the figure was made of light. It didn't have much movement at all, and there was no sound at all. It seemed like it was just kind of pacing right to left or doing something weird between the trees. He has no neighbors that are close to the location, because as I said, his forest is a couple acres, so there is no way it could have been a neighbor in his forest. To this day, the feeling that I got when I saw that still gives me shivers. Something so powerful that it emits a powerful vibe of fear and death. The fact that we went out to this forest at that time really late at night and happened to see that freaks me out as well, because it was clearly meant to be seen by us. If we went to any other location or went out any sooner or later, we might not have ever seen what it was that manifested in the forest at that moment of time. Over a decade ago, My best friend told my sister and I a story. We were all in college and she was living at her parents' for a while. They live not too far outside the city, but it's a hilly farmland, so most of the houses are pretty far apart. A family friend lived in a house across a field from them. This is what she told us. Her friend cut across a field the other night to come over. It was a clear night and a bright moon. All of a sudden, a huge shadow flew overhead, completely covering the light from the moon, so he claimed. The shadow flew straight to my best friend's house. Shaken, he continued on and once at the house, told my friend and her family what he had seen. That night, or a couple of nights later, my best friend saw a dark, three-dimensional blob hanging from her ceiling. It was darker than any shadow in the room. It hung down like a half circle or a raindrop. She saw it every night. When a light was on, there was nothing. She spent days moving things around in a room and outside a room. But that shadowy blob remained there. It didn't scare her, but she felt it was watching her. She was just started sleeping with her bedside lamp on to try to help her feel better. My sister and I thought it was a weird story, but, whatever. About 2 years later, I had completely forgotten about my friend's story. I was home alone from college for summer and had to stay in my brother's old room. Things were fine for a week or two, but one night, as I was falling asleep, I saw a three-dimensional blob sticking out from the seam where the wall meets the ceiling. It was darker than any other shadow in the room, and I had the strangest sensation that it was looking at me. I was very irked, but not afraid. I moved things around inside the room and out over the next few days, but always it was in the same place. I started sleeping with the bedside light on, and I would turn it off for a while to let my eyes adjust to each night to see if it was still there, and it was. Then after about 2 to 3 weeks, when I saw it, I found it had moved up toward me, still along the seam, about 3 feet. After that, I just kept the sort of light on. I was in and out of my room for several years, and I had never had a light off. I finished school and moved here and there, and any time I ever had to stay in that room, there is some kind of light on. I did check again though, and every now and then, over the past 5 odd years, I haven't seen it since. I never saw it in any other room or place that I lived. Final notes. The shadow the friend certainly saw could have been an owl, but he wasn't sure. But who really knows? My friend and I gave a cute name after I remembered her story and I told her I saw the same thing. Again, we got the impression that it was just curious and looking at us, but not up to anything sinister. I'm not a believer in shadow people or creatures, but honestly, I don't know how else to describe this blob. I have heard many stories on your channel, and I am glad I am not the only one who has had paranormal experiences. And that won't be the last one either. I was a bit hesitant to write my story, but I might as well give it a shot and tell it. I don't want to say my real name, but a lot of people call me Chris. Anyway, I have 2 stories to share. I am 25 years old, and I haven't experienced anything paranormal as an adult, but I can't say that I haven't experienced it in my childhood. The first paranormal experiences were in my home, a place where people should feel safe. The thing is, I don't remember much of it, but my parents do, and one day the conversation came up about the paranormal, and they decided to tell me things about the house that I don't recall or know about. My parents and I used to live in an apartment, but when I turned 3 years old, my parents and I moved into our current house, which was cheap back in the 1990s. It's not in a good or bad neighborhood, it's kind of just in a rural area. My parents told me that it was a very old house and was not in the best of conditions, but hey, it was on. Before my parents went on any further with the story, they informed me that the house was built in the late 1920s and has a history, but they wouldn't say what. They seemed hesitant. It creeped me out a bit, but I decided not to pry much into it. Something told me it was not a good idea, and I would regret knowing since I lived in the house for almost all my life. My mother told me that before we moved in, I was a cheerful child and always had a smile on my face. But while moving in the house, that all changed. She told me that I used to walk about and talk about death a lot, almost every day, and I would talk to myself most of the time. When she asked me who I was talking to, she said that it would not answer. It was like if I looked hesitant to answer. One day, I was in my own room while my parents were setting up the living room, when all of a sudden, my 3-year-old self came running into the living room. My face was all red and tears came down like a waterfall and I was screaming bloody murder, which scared the holy shit out of my parents. I told them, while pointing at my room, "There is an ugly mowed man in my room." My dad went into the room and once inside, he saw that no one else was there. My mom told me that it could have been my imagination to try to calm me down. I eventually refused to sleep in my room because of the old man. My dad had enough one day and told me whatever was in my room to please leave me alone, since I was just a child and was scared. Surprisingly, my parents told me that I went back to the room without any complaints. That should be the end, right? Wrong. After being told about my own paranormal experience, my parents told me that some of our family members experienced something paranormal in our home. I had an aunt and uncle who lived with us for 2 years. My aunt told my parents that she had paranormal experiences. My uncle was at work and my aunt was alone in the house cooking lunch. As she was cooking, she said that she couldn't help but feel that she was being watched, but ignored the feeling. However, my aunt told my parents that she heard magnets on the refrigerator moving. My aunt got scared as slowly turned, and what she saw made her scared beyond belief. She saw a little boy standing by the refrigerator. He wore clothing that looked to be from the 1930s. The boy was looking at her for a couple of seconds until he disappeared before her eyes. My aunt and uncle moved out to another state, but my dad told me that my aunt will never forget her experience in our house. First of all, I want to say sorry for my English. It's not my mother language. Now, to the story. Me, I'm 19 years old, and my younger sister, who's 13 years old, always wanted to try the Ouija board. After we read all the stories and watched the movies, we didn't really believe that someone or something could communicate with us through the board. We tried it a few times, and every time someone tried to talk to us, we made our own Ouija board out of cardboard, tinted our windows, lighted candles, and started a session. We put our hands on the glass, asked if someone was there. The glass was starting to move slowly, and we both looked up at each other, started to ask if one of us did it. We even picked up our hands a few times to make sure it was not us. So, the glass went on the yes. I started asking questions, and it answered. He said that he is a guy, and he's a bad ghost who wants to hurt us. Then the glass moved on the letters and started writing H-A, H-A. I was surprised and asked if he's making fun of us. He answered yes. Then he started to spell words. I need help. We asked what kind of help he needs. It was creepy and I could feel my hand burning and my sister's fingers were hurting, but we tried to stay calm. He continued to talk. I want to go to mall. We looked at each other in fear and confusion. I didn't know what to do. I asked if his mom was dead and he answered no. We didn't know if he was making fun of us or if he was lying. Why would he say that he is a bad ghost if he needed help? We decided to end the game, but we wanted to end it and he kept moving the glass to no. We ended it anyway with a weird feeling and headache. Next time, we almost forgot about that. We watched TV, and suddenly we heard a loud growl, like it came from down the hall. It was scary, and after we checked the house, no one was there. When we got back to our room, we heard it again, but not was longer and continued with voices. It was so scary, like thousands of people were talking and yelling. After this experience, we burned our Ouija board, and we'll never try it again.